This is Jennifer Gonzalez welcoming you to episode 258 of the Cult of Pedagogy podcast. In this episode, we're going to look at a really special practice I hope everyone can find a way to work into their own classrooms, studying and celebrating student exemplars. I want to start off by saying that I really love this episode. Most of what I share on this podcast is ultimately meant to improve learning in schools. And while that's true of today's topic, I feel like there's something else there too. It's a small set of practices that can make your classroom feel more special, that will make your students feel more seen. We're talking about using student exemplars, which is just a fancy term for student work, as part of our instructional toolbox. When my guest Marcus Luther first suggested writing a post about this, I thought it sounded fine. I used models of student work in my own teaching too, and they worked well. But then I read his post and realized there was something more elevated about the way he used them. I feel like I say this a lot, or maybe I just think it a lot, but I still think one of the most incredible aspects of teaching is the rare and special opportunity teachers get every day to just be in a room with other humans at such pivotal moments in their lives. I think we lose sight of how special that is all the time, mostly because it can be such a grind. But when we build practices into our routines that make us stop and notice the people right in front of us, that helps us get more out of it. The practices we talk about today could do that for you. This is Marcus's third time on the podcast. He was on episode 186, where he talked about gallery walks with student poetry, and episode 213, where he shared a thoughtful practice for student reflection that he called learning stories. At this point, I know when he shows up in my inbox with something he wants to share, it's going to be really good, and this third go-around is no different. Marcus's use of student exemplars accomplishes a few things. One, it provides an authentic human counterbalance for the presence of AI, a way of prioritizing real writing by real people at a time when AI threatens to make writings by humans obsolete. Secondly, it helps students get better academically. Using student models is such a powerful way to make certain academic skills easier to understand. And finally, it holds a mirror to our students and makes them see what they're good at in ways grades could never do. And the cherry on top of all that is that these strategies are easy. My hope is that as you listen, you'll immediately start thinking of ways you could do something similar in your own classroom with your own students. I can't think of a better outcome than that. Before we get started, I'd like to thank Solution Tree for sponsoring this episode. If you follow the show, you know the value in learning from other educators. That's the basis of Solution Tree's work. They match schools with experts who help them implement professional development for teachers and administrators and bring out the very best in students. What makes Solution Tree different is that their experts are real educators who have been in your shoes and have faced the same types of challenges your school may face. From building professional learning communities to improving student intervention strategies, Solution Tree has helped schools nationwide see real, sustained results in student achievement, teacher satisfaction, and overall school culture. See the kind of results they can help a school or district like yours achieve at solutiontree.com/cultofpedagogy. Support also comes from the School Me podcast. Are you looking for inspiration to elevate your teaching? The School Me podcast delivers practical solutions for today's classroom challenges. Whether you're a first-year teacher or a veteran educator, each episode brings valuable insights directly to you from fellow colleagues across the country. Every month, host Natika Samuels sits down with educators who share their classroom-tested strategies and professional wisdom. From lesson planning techniques to work-life balance tips, School Me covers what matters most to educators right now. Join thousands of educators who listen to School Me as part of their professional development regimen. Learn more at nea.org/schoolme. Now here's my conversation with Marcus Luther about some fantastic ways to use student exemplars in your classroom. Hello, Marcus Luther.
Hello. It's good to talk to you.
You too. Welcome back to your third time on the podcast.
I know. I went back and listened back to a couple of them, and I really like the through line of kind of the theme
I,
or hit on that. So yeah, it's always a joy to be here, and thank you for having me on.
oh, well, thank you. I mean, you just keep basically like putting these amazing ideas on a platter and saying, "Here, would you like to publish this for me?" And I'm like, "Yes, I would." So it's very easy. For anybody that is not familiar with you from the other two episodes, tell me a little bit about what you do in education.
Of course. First and foremost, this is about to be my 14th year teaching high school English. I
Mm-hmm.
started my career in Arkansas for nearly a decade, then moved back out to the Pacific Northwest, especially once we started having little ones. So I always start there because I feel like everything else I do is built on that foundation of that
Mm-hmm.
classroom lens.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few years back, friend and I, just like many folks, I feel is like just wanted to start recording what we were saying in terms of conversations about teaching. We created the Broken Copier as a Substack so we could also share resources and write. And I feel like some stuff has resonated in terms of people finding it being useful. And for me, selfishly, I've made some incredible connections and learned from folks from all over the place, and it's made my classroom better. But it's really been cool to pay forward some of the investment and mentoring I received earlier in my career. I feel like I'm in that
Mm-hmm.
place where I can share those ideas out in the world, starting with, including today. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
I'm going to go ahead and give the URL to the Broken Copier now, just so people listening. So it's the Broken Copier, all one word, .substack.com. And you've got some really cool topics. I mean, the one that grabbed me, and I haven't listened to it, but it's Taught for America. So this is people reflecting back on their experiences with Teach for America.
Yeah, both me and my co-founder with that came into teaching through Teach for America, and we had some
Mm-hmm.
mixed feelings now looking back on that. So we
Mm-hmm.
figured it was time to just kind of deep dive. We did a double episode reflecting on kind of what led us to make that choice, and then
Yeah.
how we feel now about the organization looking back on it.
Mm-hmm.
Both good and some pretty big critiques, and
Mm-hmm.
also just being transparent about our journey as teachers since we've been
Yeah.
writing and sharing as much as we had with the Broken Copier. But I know also there are many people who've gone to TFA and had many different experiences. So we try to be really good about like we're just speaking for our experiences. But yeah, it resonated with a lot of people. I had a lot of emails afterwards of like, oh yeah, I did TFA too, and like some
Mm-hmm.
conversations there. So yeah, that's a whole different topic. But it was
Mm-hmm.
a really cool. Yeah, we just try to make sure that we're just open about what our journey was been and also kind of
Yeah.
how we feel about education through that classroom lens. And I felt like
Yeah.
TFA was deserving of that consideration. And it was a really
Mm-hmm.
good conversation with Jim.
Good. So yeah, and I just wanted to kind of like put that out there for people that are interested. And as I scroll through some of the content, like I'm seeing some of the guests that I've actually had on my podcast also. So it looks like anybody that likes my stuff would also like Broken Copier. So but that is not what we're here to talk about today. So you came to me a little while ago with this idea about writing about some of the practices that you use in your classroom with student exemplars. And I loved every word of it. And so this is also going to be a guest blog post. But why don't we just sort of like set the stage here and explain what exactly is a student exemplar and why is now a time when you really want to sort of elevate the practice of using these? And then we're going to get into some actual ideas for how to do it.
Of course, I think in my eyes, the easiest way to define an exemplar is a high quality or specific model of what you're
Mm-hmm.
asking students to do. So, I mean, fancy way of saying example, but
Mm-hmm.
by adding the phrase or using the phrase exemplar, you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to put a model that you want students to aspire to in
Mm-hmm.
some way. And then
Mm-hmm.
by student exemplar, like it was created or produced by a student. So,
Mm-hmm.
really trying to bring student exemplars into the classroom is the overarching idea of the piece. And it's
Yeah.
something that I consider a best practice. I think a lot of folks do in terms of offering models and exemplars to help student writers. And for me, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, if we can bring student exemplars in, there's a lot of rewards that can come from that.
Yeah. And I should preface this too, like we're going to be looking at examples from an English language arts class, but when I was reading it, I thought you could really do this in any subject area and really with really little kids even. You could do this same kind of thing with a lot of work. So anybody listening, do not think this is just going to be for English teachers. This really could be used all across the board.
Of course, and and we'll get into this. I think there's also something that you take away as a teacher from this lens that applies
Mm-hmm.
to all, anytime you're looking at student work, regardless of the content. And what I'm going to share, of course, today is how it's changed my practices and just perspective as a teacher too.
Mm,
So it's not just about the output; it's about
yeah.
kind of the how and why that you get out of it as a teacher.
Yeah. One of the things you say at the end of the post connects a little bit to AI, and you can't sneeze without sneezing on something that has to do with AI and education. So rather than leave that for the end, can you share a little bit about that kind of takeaway?
Yeah, I guess like with that, for me, just being completely honest, like I hold a lot of anxiety in this moment as
Mm-hmm.
a teacher of writing, as someone who like part of my identity is loving writing and working with students and seeing their growth as writers. As a parent of young ones and wanting them to love writing and reading. And I think we're in this really ambiguous moment in terms of these big questions of what is writing? What is reading going to be if in our minds we know that not everything that we're reading was produced by another human, and how is that going
Mm,
to change just our own interaction with language? And for me, instead of just living in this like philosophical cloud, which I do at times in the summer
hmm.
especially, the most straightforward response is to lean into authenticity, to lean into student voice in any way I can in the classroom.
Yeah.
And when I do that, it kind of like brings me back, and it's like kind of like touching the ground, like, okay, like at least in the short term, this is the path forward. I have no ideas what the bigger questions are, and I know that there are debates about AI.
Mm,
What it for me in the classroom, how do I lean into authentic student writing? How do I elevate student voice so that they see purpose in writing? And that's how I'm responding. And I'm also just trying to keep learning and keep reading and wondering and not get too overwhelmed, because it is
mm.
really overwhelming. How do you feel? I mean, as someone who's in this world as well.
You know what? Okay, well, I'll tell you, whenever COVID first hit and everybody was starting to write about distance learning, I stuck my head in the sand for a good month or two and said, I don't, this will pass. I'm not going to, I'm not going to talk about this. I just kind of like to have a very much of a wait and see kind of a mentality. I am finding myself using AI more and more, not to replace what I do, but as a thought partner, as a research, I'm using it instead of Google. And I'm finding a lot of really it jumps me, it leapfrogs me forward in work that used to drag out and gets, I feel like it helps me to make the best use of what I'm really good at, as opposed to the things that used to just be super time consuming and annoying. And I don't know if that's probably making my brain lazier and my writing a little bit lazier, but I don't know. I kind of feel like it's maximizing my potential in some ways.
And I've heard some really
Yeah.
incredible things, and not just like these, pie in the sky, but like genuine authentic uses like that are
Mm-hmm.
good. And I think those are real. And I try to, when I explore with it, I try to use a learner lens. Like I feel like so often it's pitched as this tool for efficiency to save you time. And
Mm.
there's something that's lost in that, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
didn't make the thing and then I walk into the classroom, or I didn't
Yeah.
give the feedback. Like that's tragic in my mind, right? Like there's
Yeah.
something that's lost. But I do think when I'm like exploring a new concept or trying to
Mm-hmm.
do some retrieval on something I learned in college, I did that the other day for about an hour and spent some time just asking my questions and kind of asking for some, like, offered some interpretations, and I asked for
Mm-hmm.
like what are the critiques of that interpretation, and I did find some value out of that wouldn't have been
Mm-hmm.
available through Google. So I'm trying to stay really open-minded, because I don't think
Yeah.
any of us know the right answer, and I do
Mm-mm.
think that we have to try it out ourselves. But for me, the trying it out with that learner hat on is always
Yeah.
valuable as a teacher, and that's where I'm trying to live. But that's
Mhm.
different than bringing it into the classroom, where my goal is to develop critical thinking and reading and writing. And
Yeah.
the last thing I want to do is bring in a shortcut around those things. So until I'm
Right.
sure that it's not a shortcut, because right now a lot of things I'm seeing look very shortcutty, I'm
Mhm.
gonna hold tight and keep doing the things that I know work and the know that I know have value.
Yeah. And pre AI or pre this version of AI, because I think it's been around longer than we sort of have paid attention to, but like there were already several very compelling reasons to reduce our classrooms down to analog stuff anyway, just social reasons and attention reasons. And so this is just one more reason to just have days where you are unplugged completely and just working with your brain and words and each other. And so, the example of the stuff that we're talking about today is like a really simple way of doing that too.
For sure. I'm excited to share too.
Me too.
I'm a few weeks away from diving back in. This is like a good like ramp up into getting excited
Yeah.
for the school year.
Well, and it's interesting because the last time you were here, you were talking about poetry gallery walks, which was another, I think, example of this, what we're talking about. This is a very specific use case, but now you're broadening this out. And I loved that lesson. So this before what we're going to be doing today is giving 3 examples of ways that you use student exemplars, but you start the post by talking about a practice that you got from Kelly Gallagher. So we're going to shout him out and just talk about that because that already grabbed me. What is the beautiful language wall?
Oh, this wall is like, I think we all have our spaces in our classroom that we love. This is a bulletin board that
Mm-hmm.
starts the year completely blank, other than a small placard that says "Beautiful Language Wall," and it is. It's something that I got as an idea from a session with Kelly way back in like I think like Jonesboro, Arkansas, almost a decade ago. And just
Mm-hmm.
the idea was, if you see something good that a student writes, put it on the wall and use it as a tool potentially to share out. And he showed some examples of those, and I got really excited about it. So I'm like, let's lean into this thing. And essentially, what that entails is whenever I'm reading student writing, I have a separate document open and I'm looking for anything that stands out to me. It's a student took a risk. They did something innovative. They did something
Mm-hmm.
just beautiful in that case, right? Going to that
Mm-hmm.
word. And then that becomes something that I will showcase, and always anonymously. I'm never going to put a student's name on this, but I'm going to say, hey, here's what one of you did. Let me talk about why I love it. And then a lot of times with help from some very handy dandy aides, they'll print it off, cut it up, and put it on the wall. And you can imagine a blank bulletin board and doing this throughout a school year to the point where you can barely see the bulletin board by the end, where you have hundreds upon hundreds of sentences. And it just becomes this really incredible space in the classroom. And that first year I did it, I remember that it was fall conferences, and I just started doing it. It wasn't that full at that point. And I had one of those students who their parents came in, and this is one of those students who is just good in all their classes. Like they show up, they do all the work, they're very studious. And I was kind of curious, are they enjoying our class? Like they have an A, they're doing well. And we get through the normal parts of the conference, and the mom looks over her shoulder and she says, "Oh, that's the wall." And I'm like, "Yeah, you know about the wall?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, she told me every single time her sentence got on there." And
Oh.
I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna keep doing this." Now, like a decade
Mm-hmm.
later, because I think we have these traditional ways of celebrating and affirming students, but it's nice to have some more tools on the tool belt. And this has become a really valuable tool for me to affirm students in ways that are beyond the grade book.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to let people listening know that Marcus did actually give me pictures of the before and after of this wall. So you're going to be able to see it if you go over to the site and take a look at it. Do students spend time back there just standing there looking at it at downtime?
Oh, gallery walks, it's one of the tricky thing, right? Because they're circling the room, and then when they make the lap, then they can get stuck there. A lot of times they'll circle back after, because I'll never
Yeah.
name like so and so wrote this,
Uh-huh.
but they know, and they'll sometimes go back and hunt. You every once in a while you'll have the selfies and the different bringing friends into it. It's just
Yeah.
it's a cool thing, and for me, it's one of my like rituals at the end of the year when I'm like mourning the ending of our school year. It's like I just like go
Mm.
through them one at a time and pull them off at the end of the year. So selfishly, I love it too. But yeah, it's a
Yeah.
cool thing.
It's so lovely. I just love it. Okay, so that one wasn't even 3 or one of your 3 things, but I wanted to point that out because that's the thing that really got my attention at the very beginning. So, okay. So strategy number 1 for using student exemplars, you said is looking for and celebrating specific wins. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So we have lessons, feedback lessons in our classroom. Any day we're
Mm-hmm.
returning student writing back to them.
Mm-hmm.
I think I actually shared about that a little bit with our reflection system
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what that looks like in our classroom in a previous episode. But on those days, before we say, here are like the collective growth trends and things we need to get better at, I try to shout out, here are some wins. And the sentences are one of those versions. But I have a colleague, a good friend, Andrea James, a phenomenal teacher. She's one of those teachers who's like, brings so much energy to the classroom every day. She's like that height person. Like I can't do it. It's not my
Mm.
natural way of being.
Yeah.
But anyhow, she's really good about this. So I've borrowed this practice from her, where it's not just here are the best essays, or here's who got the highest score, because I don't think that adds a lot of value. Instead, it's going in and saying, here are my favorite titles. Let me talk about why. Here are my favorite openings. Here are my favorite moves midway through. Here are my favorite closings. So trying to challenge yourself to think of different specific wins you can look for, instead of just saying, oh, I'm going to celebrate who got the top score or something like that. Because
Yeah.
if you're doing that, there's a lot, if your goal is to center student writing, a lot of students are going to get left out of that practice.
Yep.
And we have a little cardboard paper crown I make at the start of the year. It's just another little tool to use. And again, it takes me like 5 minutes to slap it together at the beginning, but then it becomes pretty competitive, where I've had students who are like, oh yeah, I finally get assigned the crown by the end of the year. And again, like if you're celebrating titles, that student might actually struggle on different parts of the project or the essay.
Yeah.
But they might have had a really good title. And like I had a student I know I share in the piece who was a student who had, we'll just say generously, like a roller coaster of a school year. And, but was working and making progress, but wasn't going to be that student who had the top notch essay start to finish, and probably didn't even get, looking back, the best score in their eyes. But I remember what happened when it became their title on the screen and they got assigned for the title crown. It was like they yelled so loudly, like the other kids had to like scoot their desks away. And I was just a little bit like, okay, like we're good. Like let's
oh my gosh,
sign the crown.
No, that meant so much to them though.
Oh, it did. And I heard from the mom after when I went to such, like she had already been told by him, and he wore the crown the rest of the period. Usually they just sign it and set it on the desk, but he just wore the crown. But my point, stepping back, is it's another tool to recognize and affirm students who might not always get that recognition. So you're trying to like widen your lens. And I also think there's something, I think celebration's great. And I'm someone who didn't like to be celebrated myself as a student. So I've learned to go beyond projecting my needs as a student and doing what's best for students. So that's something over my career I've shifted towards. But there's also something really authentic and affirming about not just saying this is really good, but let me talk about it and treat it almost the way we would a piece of literature, and say, let me show you the strategy and use it as a tool to help other students. I think that's just a really powerful move. Yeah. And it's not just this empty, like pat on the back celebration. It's really meaningful to students for them to see their words, their ideas, their risks as writers become guideposts for their classmates.
So along with announcing, and I want to also describe what I'm looking at. I'm looking at what I believe is a PowerPoint slide or a Google slide, and it's got the title and what it looks almost like. Do you roll these out with like, okay, so
yeah, they've got animations. They pop up one at a time.
With the animation. So we've got like the 3 runners up basically, and there's the titles and the name of the students underneath, but then there's this space at the top for like the crown and the name of the student. So I can totally imagine these students as you roll these out one at a time. So along with that, though, you do sort of like a craft lesson, basically pointing out what's working about these pieces, these chunks of writing.
Yeah, and I do the same thing similarly with the sentences I mentioned that go on the wall throughout the year. And even going back to that student who had that conference, that was a sophomore. I remember at their graduation speech a couple years later as a senior, as a valedictorian, one of like their very generous shout outs was like, thank you for that classroom that taught me to love English. And I really do believe there is a through line to authentically bringing in student writing and celebrating and affirming it in that space. And then a student feeling like, oh, it wasn't just a class I got an A in. It's something that classroom saw me and saw my voice and my story. And this is a tool for me to do that much more often. And it becomes part of our culture in our classroom. And it's fun. Like I enjoy it.
Yeah. I'm also thinking about some of the things that I have learned about feedback and how giving specific feedback is so much better than generic feedback. Like just saying to a student, no, you're a good writer, that doesn't really land. But just saying that title was so effective because of this. The message that they get is, I'm a good writer. They actually get that, sinks in more than saying you're a good writer. Pointing out a specific thing they did well is more impactful.
And we said, I have a vision document at the start of the year of like, what are the things I want to be for my students to be true by the end of the year? And one of those bullet points is I feel more confident in myself as a writer, as both a versatile writer and authentic writer. Like I want students to leave the classroom feeling as if they're more confident in themselves as writers, which is really tricky to do in this moment. And I think this activity and activities around this topic are really powerful tools for me that I lean upon a lot.
Yeah. Can What is this vision document? Is this something
Oh,
just for you, or do you share it with your students? Because I feel a fourth blog post coming
yeah.
from you now.
I wrote that
I
one
want
up
to
on the
hear about
broken
this.
copier. I will email it to you afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually way back in the TFA days. They made us do those year one, and they're not very effective year one because you don't really know what you're envisioning, but they are
Yeah.
really effective now. I mean, tangent. I think it's
Yeah.
way more meaningful to say, here's what I want to be true for students in my classroom. Here's why I want it to be true. It's student facing and family
Yeah.
facing. I attach it to my syllabus,
Okay.
and
Uh-huh.
here's how I will know. And then I get to the end of the year and I go through that list and I say, what was true and what was not. And then that leads to my goal making for the next year. I know you've talked with like Alex Chevron Burnett many times, and
Yeah.
we did a whole book study over one of her pieces, Adrian
Yeah.
Nybauer and myself, this past year. And the
Mm-hmm.
whole SMART goal thing that, SMART goals are limiting, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
authentically saying, here's what I want to be true for your classroom or my classroom,
Yeah.
and then holding myself accountable to it, that makes me a better teacher for students and better at articulating the why behind it. So to circle
Mm-hmm.
back to this practice, it aligns with that vision of I want students to leave this classroom believing in themselves as a writer. And I had a student this last year actually was having a kind of tough time senior year, and they came back and they said they still had access to all their essays in their reflection document. And they said, I needed to go back and reread that stuff to remember how much I love writing and how good of a writer I am. And that for me, it was like a pretty affirming thing to hear, is like, this isn't just a 1 year thing. You're trying to build a foundation for them that they can come
Yeah.
back to. And
Yeah.
it all ties together for sure. Sorry, I'm
Just
going on and on. I apologize.
No, this is all very good stuff. Before we move to the next thing, so we've talked about how you do this for titles. Can you list off a couple of other things just to kind of get people's gears turning? Like, what other things are you celebrating as individual things like that?
Yeah, the other easy ones are best hook or opening, and then of
Mm-hmm.
course closing. I
Mm-hmm.
like, for instance, it could be like specific use of a word sometime, like the best
Mm.
word that just popped. It could
Mm-hmm.
be choice of evidence and elaboration or articulation of that evidence.
Ooh, good.
And then
Yeah.
I also, especially as we move on and try to get outside the box and have some more creative structures, like structural choices of like, oh, I had like this single sentence paragraph midway through this essay that
Mm.
really change the entire dynamic. So I kind of try to
Yeah.
almost like widen what I'm looking for over the course of the year as students start being permitted to take more risks as writers.
Nice. Hey, this is Jen. I am going to interrupt this episode for just a minute to tell you about something I think will be a big help to you as an educator, whether you're a teacher, a school leader, an instructional coach, or even someone studying to become a teacher. It's something I've been publishing for the last 10 years called The Teacher's Guide to Tech, and it's basically an encyclopedia of tech tools curated especially for teachers. My team and I keep an eye on all the tech tools that are out there, the ones that are fresh and new, and the ones that have stood the test of time, and we think about how they can best be used in classrooms. Then we sort them into categories, give you a really simple description of what each one does, provide a link to the tool's website so you can check it out, and we also pick out a video that shows the tool in action so you can understand quickly how it works and if it will work for you. And because tech changes all the time, we have to maintain these listings to make sure they stay fresh and accurate. On top of that, we have a really nice collection of articles we've written that will help you explore more ways to use tech and fine-tune and troubleshoot things as you go along. Plus, there's a huge glossary of tech terms to help you stay current with the language. In the past, this guide was published as a PDF that we updated once a year. Although this worked fine, that PDF would stay the same all year until the new edition came out. In January of 2025, we moved the entire guide to a fully online subscription-based model. This allows us to update it all year round, keeping it fresh and new all the time. A year's subscription costs exactly the same as the PDF used to cost, so we haven't raised the price one bit, and it's even more affordable if you get it as a group. To learn more about how this guide can help you become the most tech-savvy teacher in your school, visit teachersguidetotech.com. Okay, we're going to move to the next, number 2, which is letting students interact with exemplars. Talk to me about what you do under that banner.
So This is new this year. This is the first time I did this, and this is with my juniors, and we had essentially moved into much more creative forms of writing. They were actually, this is from an essay where they synthesized their interpretation of Shakespeare's King Lear with their interpretation of a choice of a 21st century poem and how they work together, but then also how it spoke to today's moment. So they were talking about their own lives also. So we're trying to get away from the, in the box 5-paragraph essay that I think we all bemoan at this point.
Yeah.
And they were trying to, I encouraged them. I said, look, a lot of times introductions are kind of generic and fall flat. And a lot of times the way you guys end, it's like a runner at the end of a marathon. You just kind of collapse and like, you just like type a few sentences. And I'm like, I get so excited for your conclusions. And I challenged them. I said, hey, go for it. Take a risk. So then I was reading through them. I'm like, oh, they did it. And I was seeing these really cool choices to open their essays as well as close. And I started wanting to do like, the same thing that I just talked about. Like, oh, let's just sign the crown for best opening. But I'm like, there's more meat on the bone for this. So and these are longer. They're not just one sentence. They're sections of their essays. So I copied and pasted them for a gallery walk. And I included what I would have said at the front of the room, where it's like, here are some cool choices this student made. Again, their names were not on them. And that became a gallery walk. So this is part of our feedback lesson. So students, before they had seen their own feedback for their own writing, they didn't have access to it at this point. They had turned it into me. They traveled around the room and read these openings and read these closings. And they also left initials on their favorites. And then they debriefed with their partners or their small groups when they got back to their desks saying, oh, here was one that I really liked and here's why. And that meant that for some of the students in those rooms, they were hearing their peers talking about what they learned from their own writing. And again, some of them admitted it was theirs and others kept it to themselves.
Yeah.
But it's one thing to me talking about it at the front of the room. It's another thing for them to be physically interacting with the writing of their peers, talking about the writing of their peers as an exemplar. And of course, by having multiple of them, you're not saying here's the one way. I think so often the one exemplar can be problematic because it tunnel visions your students towards one style. But by me throwing up 5 and 5, it really, and none that I created, because a lot of times the exemplars to start the project, I'm gonna write it myself and show an exemplar. It was all student created. They were interacting with them, and it was just a really cool experience. And that was actually what motivated me. I'm like, I got to put this all together and like send it out. And it really was a powerful space to be in.
I love that idea. It's just so interesting to be using you're using their stuff as curriculum, basically.
Well, at the same time too, it's like, I have to create writing tasks and opportunities that are worthy of celebration, right? If you are asking students, if you're drawing like a really tight box and saying your introduction has to look like this, you have to use this sentence starter. And again, scaffolds are important and have a place. And I also know, like, if I'm teaching an AP class, there are strategies for that timed essay on the AP exam where we might kind of draw a box and say, this is your best strategy. But if the only thing students are doing is trying to replicate structures and styles that we are handing them, that's not their voice. That's not their ingenuity and innovation. And in this given moment of AI, where you can click a button and get that, like, this is the time for us to push them outside of the box and give them permission to take risks as writers, and then support them right along the way. You have to create an environment for that. We don't do this. This activity is not a beginning of year. We have built trust. We have built permission structures to go for it. This is a second semester activity, but it's an accountability lens for me. Like, I've got to do the work to make this possible in our classroom.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how you build that trust and permission structures? What is a permission structure in your class?
I think of it in a twofold lens. Well, one in terms of the expectation on the front end of what guidance are you giving them? What samples are you giving them? I have a slide deck that I put together of some of like 50 of my favorite sentences from literature, and we use them as bell ringers sometimes. So it's not just, here is your complex sentence, write this. Here is how to use a semicolon. But these are like innovative moves that other writers have made, and we use them for our own bell ringers. And that's helpful to like let students try some things out. So those are smaller things along the way. And on the back end, I also think it's from like a grading policy. If you don't have students have a chance to revise or peer workshop and they only get one shot at it, I get why they would play it safe and just, not take that risk. So you also, I feel like, need to have policies in your classroom that accommodate risk. I know, and it's not, I mean, I'm a big fan of the theories around alternative grading and things like that.
Yeah.
But for me, it's just as simple as, after you get feedback, you do get a chance to revise, and we are going to have a peer workshop day. And so you're building those structures to accommodate that risk and to make it rewarding for students, because a lot of these are sometimes students who they've gotten A's all the way as students, and you have to create other ways to motivate and find purpose, because they could probably, some of them in their sleep could write an essay that gets the grade they want. But
Yes.
like, there's more to education than this transactional culture that we've created, where it's you do the work to get the grade, to get the degree, to get the job. Like, you got to disrupt that. And for me, this is a form of disruption, where that student who already was getting A's, now they're aspiring to sign the crown. And that's crazy, but literally I have a reflection in the piece of a student who was excited to sign the crown, and that was what was motivating them. And even if that was a student who got an A on all their other essays too.
Yeah. And I was always a really big proponent when I taught, because I was also an English teacher, about the power of just models, and getting, when we want students to give each other feedback, it's really hard to get them to do that well without some training and some prep work, basically. And what you're doing here is a really nice way of doing that. I used to just give everybody the same model and we would discuss it, but having this more interactive gallery walk, I feel like it sends the conversation floating around the room, and you hear more people's comments about it. And I don't know, there's just more of a chance for a dynamic conversation.
Can you think of a time, like, who was like a boss you had, or a principal, I should say, when you were in the classroom, who really made you feel affirmed as a teacher?
Who?
Sorry if like there wasn't one, and I feel like touched the toxic button.
It's not that there were so many people that were toxic as much as they just weren't really in my room.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my principal used to say to me, "You're one of my best teachers." And I said, first of all, I had a great relationship with him. I said, but respectfully, how do you know that? Because you're not really ever in my room. I know you're busy, but how would you know that? And he's like, well, I just never get any complaints or calls from parents. And it's just like, I could be pretty crappy though. You wouldn't know it.
The reason I bring that up is when I think personally, like, if I feel affirmed as a teacher, I feel more permitted to go for it and to try things out. Like, I'm my best self. And I also can take feedback too. Like, I can take more critical if I know that person sees me for my strengths. So I feel like a lot of this comes from, are you building a culture in your room where students feel affirmed, not just as writers, but as people? And then from that platform, you can do things like this. So I think it's worth wondering, what are you doing in your classroom to affirm your students as writers, of course, but also as just people. And they deserve that in every classroom.
Yes.
But when you do that, it unlocks potential of activities like this, and all the more reason to go for it.
Yeah, no, you're right though, because once somebody has been built up a little bit, they are more resilient to more critical feedback. And again, I want to loop back around again to that specificity, because if all you've been saying to them is you're a good writer, it's so easy to just brush that off as just words. But if you've already had specific sentences pointed out to you and other people have been like, yeah, that's a banger right there. That's a good one. Like, then you grow and have more capability for the critical stuff. I love it. Anything else you want to talk about with that second practice before we move on to the third?
No, other than it's a cool thing to be able to hand the students a piece of paper at the end of the activity and say, hey, by the way, I don't need this anymore, but here's your paper anonymously with all your peers having left their initials saying how much it meant to them. So nice little artifact to hand to them.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. So the third one is bring student exemplars to life in your space. And this is a really cool one.
Yeah. And this one's, I would say, like, more personal, like practices in my classroom. And I think this is the kind of thing that happens when you're in your mind prioritizing what are different ways I can center student writing. This one is a direct connection to the poetry gallery walk activity that I've shared through your website. And so basically, this one took place, it was at the end of our first semester, and students had a month before written a narrative poem. And we'd already done all of our cycles of feedback, including them going to the library, leaving their feedback on each other's. They had received theirs back. And this comes from a priority of classroom community too, because a semester at our schools, sometimes they mix up the schedules a little bit. So like that group you had first semester might be a different group second semester. So we'd finished all of our activities. The semester's almost over. I usually wait till there's about 20 minutes left. And then the mic drop line is always, okay, we're going to read one more poem. And my kids at this point really do like poetry. I promise. Like it gets high ratings as a unit in our class, but there were some groans, right? There's like some really like Mr. Luther's doing a Mr. Luther thing here, more TQE. And I say like, get your highlighters out. And so I pass these out. And what I have done is as I was reading those poems in the previous month, my goal was to take at least one line from every single poem. And this is just me just enjoying that puzzle work outside of school, right? This is an extra thing that I find value in, and trying to fit it together into one class poem. And I did this with each class period. And by the way, it's really fun activity. I enjoy doing that. And then I also I think it's there's of course some obvious symbolism there of like, yeah, these do fit together. They by themselves, they are incredible, but the stories from different people fit together. And as a teacher, you get that bird's eye view. You see it. I see it. So my goal was for them to see it. So anyhow, we bring the poem into the class. They all have a copy there, and the rule was we're going to choral read this one, not choral read. One student's going to read one line. Next student's going to read line 2 all the way around the room. And you weren't allowed to talk. And so they start doing this, first student reads line 1 and then they keep going. And then the whispers start because students start noticing what this is. And a few start trying to point. I'm trying to tone the classroom down, shh, be quiet, don't talk yet. And it's just such it's how we end the semester is them reading a poem compiled from all of each other. And lives on the wall in the hallway as well, here's what our students wrote together. And I've had students, and I share an example of this, 4 or 5 months later at the end of the year, this is what they say was their most meaningful moment. And it isn't about, oh, this is the, example, really cool use of this simile with a line break and jam it. I've taken away the craft analysis and said, every single student wrote something that matters. And by the way, they all fit together if you look for a way for them to fit together. Yeah. And when I think about this current moment, in our, not just our education system, but in our country, can't think of a better activity to end a semester on. And so I just wanted to make sure I shared that. It's not just about craft and rapport and building better writers, though it is all those things. It's about finding ways to affirm students authentically and not just individually, but collectively. Yeah. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that kind of gives me chills. And also you're saying that it's a fun activity for you to do, but what a incredible way to really sink into the work that you've done with students. And, we spend a lot of time as teachers having to move quickly through things, and to be able to just really focus on choosing the lines. First of all, that's got to be really time consuming, but really satisfying. When do you start? Do you start pretty far back in the year, starting to when you catch a line, do you have a place that you store it just to help you later?
Systems beget systems, right? Because I had already done my pulling in my favorite lines and sentences as I was reading them. Yeah. So I had them on a document. So now it's just about picking them. Maybe I need a few extra lines from one to like tie this together. Yeah. You kind of get your creative writing lens of finding ways to make it work. Yeah, it's definitely like it's a unique craft to try to put it all together. But I'd already done the work of pulling the sentences from that beautiful language wall. So, or beautiful words wall. So yeah, it works out well.
As I listen to you talk about, and this is now the third time, about your classes and about the intentionality that you put into your teaching, I just think of how lucky your kids are to be placed in your class, just, accidentally, really. And I hope that by sharing your practices, I help more teachers become more like that, because it's just, it makes those moments really special. We're in these rooms with these other humans, and if we're not doing special stuff, why are we there?
And I think part of me, the conviction driving, and why I'm so appreciative of the chance to share it, is that I feel like there's a vacuum, where we don't always talk about the good things that are happening in our classrooms, in our
Right?
schools.
Yeah.
And I know there are good things. I talked about my colleague. Like I could walk into a lot of classrooms, and we are at your average public school,
Mm.
run of the mill. Is not, and I love our school. It's not me being negative about it. It's just saying that I know there are so many incredible things happening in so many public school classrooms all over the country. And I don't feel like we get the platform all the time to share
Yeah.
about them.
Yep.
And then what that becomes, that vacuum becomes an excuse for a lot of negative actors to come in and take advantage and say, hey, look what everything's broken. Nothing's good happening.
Yeah.
I'm like, time out. Before
Yeah.
you come into my classroom and tell me what to do, why don't you just sit for a second and see the things that are happening? And I think for me, and this comes back to why we wanted to start the Broken Copier, is we need to tell the good story about what's happening. That is not me trying to be toxically positive and say there aren't things to work on. Like we need to get better. We need to fix some things. But I also want to make sure we include the incredible things that are happening and what students are doing, because it's happening all over the place. And anytime we have a chance to shout as loud as possible about how incredible students are, especially in the summer months when we might forget, and students do incredible things. And again, my gratitude for the chance to just kind of brag on my students for 45 minutes to get myself excited for the upcoming school year. But I think it's a reminder for all of us too, is how are you using the time in your classroom? I think we all say we value student voice. Like, are you giving it a chance to live and breathe in your classroom? And I think this is a good challenge, if not, to try to find one or two ways to do that a little bit better going forward.
Yeah. Marcus, thank you so much for always sharing.
Thank you for
such
having me.
fantastic
This is fun.
stuff.
Now I'm excited to dive back in. I got a blank wall to start filling up in a few weeks.
To read Marcus's post about these practices and see photos of what this looks like in his classroom, visit cultofpedagogy.com, click podcast, and choose episode 258. To get a regular email from me about my newest blog posts, podcast episodes, courses, products, and speaking services, sign up for my mailing list at cultofpedagogy.com/subscribe. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great day.